PCO coming through, I am turned back, right, with British citizenship. Every time I attempt with my British passport, they ask me to go back. They consider me a security risk. People who fought in Lebanon, right, for years, they come and greeted nicely, to go through the checkpoint. I always say, the revolutionaries, and the queuing are going through. There's no risk for Israel. I am considered the risk. I had a meeting in Hebron. I said to him, please, I am in a hurry. I have a meeting, with Hebron University. I'm late, right? He said, it's not my problem. Turn back. People behind me, I know them, and I know where they've been, right? They were allowed in.
Yeah.
So what kind of security we're talking about? This is just a fake Israeli government propaganda. Because
your solution will settle this issue.
yes, because
I think our solution is based mainly upon moral perspective. It's realistic and moral. We are now in the evening of Passover, the holiday of liberation of the people of Israel. And I think morally, from Jewish perspective, we cannot. We are the only nation. We are the only people that rule, that control, that occupying other people all over the world. Now, I think it's so abnormal, not only by the general humanistic perspective that I also a part of it, but from the Jewish perspective, we cannot. There is no justification for the occupation. There is no nationalistic, no security. There is no justification, and we are talking about a democratic region, full democratic, full equality, or wish to be equal, and we think that this model of the confederation can, first of all, respect the story of each nation, the linkages and the engagements of each people, each nation to the whole homeland, and the story of the last 100 years of conflict and bloodshed, and take mutual responsibility and mutual recognition by that to have prosperity for all the inhabitants of the land. And it's a model that's combine the two states. We are not desperate for the two states. Everyone now is desperate from the two states. We are not.
Okay, let's open up for questions. If you want to direct it to one of the panelists or all of them, go ahead. Yes, please.
This is regarding from a European point of view, you think that the model of European Union will be a possible solution. People like German people living in Mallorca and Spain, for instance.
Or France. The Germany and France were
the French Riviera, of course. But listen, first of all, it's not necessary to get a Brexit for the Palestinian exit before you consider there's differences in people, because right now the progress of Israel from the Palestinians is not like this European vision.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that nowadays for 20 years, the Palestinian Authority is like what we had during the 30s and the 40s. We had we call it in Hebrew Medina Shebaderech, the state in its procedure, in its being. And I think from what I know, and I'm meeting a lot with Palestinians, that some of them belongs to the officially to the Palestinian Authority. I think it's also reflecting their perspective. There is now, if Israel could, if we had enough people that will believe in our model or in other model, and pressure our politicians that are lousy, as you know, to make a peace agreement. I think that the Palestinian state is almost ready, is there. We, the Israelis, doesn't know how. For instance, I know how I'm dealing with mentioned it as a social activist in the field of politics and religion. In the state of Israel, for instance, Jews can be married and be divorced only by the Jewish law. In Palestine, for instance, it's much more open and democratic. It's full. It's not the Muslim law that forced each individual. It's not the Sharia. It's the civil law. So, for instance, there are some fields and that the Palestinians living in much more open and democratic atmosphere
Yeah, so I think that you were also talking about like sovereignty, having power, having a state. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the idea of a Brexit was first having some sort of power over your own life and not having, a boot on your throat. So yes, I think that that's one of the reasons why we understand that both nations are not in a post-national stage. Neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians. They are not a post-national stage. They don't believe that they're going to be global citizens in a post-national world and everybody, is going to, drink Diet Coke and fly on Itihad. But what there is an understanding is that, yes, you need a national identity, you need sovereignty, there will be a parliament, there'll be a Palestinian parliament that Palestinians are voting for. There will be, for instance, the immigration policy. One of the right of return is not just going to be something that just happens. Each state is going to have its own immigration policy, and the Palestinian state will decide who's coming back, when are they coming back, where are they going, and so this thing has to be developed. But we also know that economically, right now, one of the major problems, and if anybody wants to attack our initiative, that the best attack is to say, what are you doing with the economic inequalities? What are you going to do with the disparities in infrastructure? How is that going to play out? How do you create a situation where the Palestinians don't enter into a slave economy with the Israelis? And that's a very important question.
Your answer?
Well, our answer is that similarly to the European Union, when things were done gradually with the economic issues and the environmental infrastructure issues, they're guiding the change. That's part of the work that we need to do. But the basis for that work, which is different than the European Union, which went from the economic to the political, we're doing a different thing. We're doing first the political and then the economic. And so that's the shift. First we're saying...
Just to point the question, if this system works for the West Bank, for instance, and what about Gaza?
Let's start with this. Gaza.
Actually,
this is not difficult enough.
No, but I'm saying, something, I think that it's very important for us not to think that Gaza, the Magritte's drawing of the castle in the sky. So there's a sense as if Gaza is somewhere. Gaza is part of
Palestine.
Area. It's part of Palestine, and we cannot look at it. We cannot say this. We have to fix this, all of it. We have to fix all of it.
Yeah, can I just add one thing about Gaza? 80% of the people in Gaza have actually pushed into Gaza from places like Safad and Led and other places. Yeah, and they've been squeezed in this area. Of course, if you squeeze anything, it will blow up. This is what the problem of Gaza is. If we have the solution, of course, people don't want to live in Gaza anymore. So Gaza will become prosperous again, peaceful place. 20% are indigenous Gazans, and 80% are refugees. So these are internal refugees, where they have right of return to, similar to other refugees elsewhere. This is part of the problem, and that's why Gaza became a problem to Israel.
All these people will want to return to Jaffa and according to your plan? These are not the Amuk people or something. No. These are people, according to what you say, they will, according to what you propose, they will have to come.
But we are talking about...
it's not so simple.
About gradually immigrant into Israel, and we are talking about something that will be accepted by the both governments and the joint institutions of the Confederation. We shouldn't forget this model of.
Well, let me
Yes,
just
George.
Yeah, I'm George Sousa. I also do the thinking in the same direction that you all think. I think what I hear here is a very significant team of people contributing in a very constructive way to thinking. I think the problem that we face here is the fact that we're fragmented. And as long as we remain fragmented, we will have wonderful ideas, but they'll never coalesce to influence decision making. Take, for example, women wage fees. I think they are extremely valuable, particularly because they are women, and they know, because they have children, they have families, they know what it means to have peace or no peace, versus us men who are very much. I think that it is very important that anyone who is involved in thinking about the future of peace should really think, first of all, how do we work out so that we have a common ground? Without it, we will have many models and no solutions. It will be fragments, not solutions. The other point that really struck me is what you just said about the religious dimension and the fact that there are certain things that the Torah prohibits or the Torah allows. And I think, this is particularly this important time, is to put your mission, just take that element and discuss it publicly.
Okay.
And say, so those are my comments. What reaction?
Thank you.
No, yeah, because I'm from Europe and because of your comparisons here in Union, I'm like, okay, trust, and I mean, the Dutch don't want to help the Greek, economically and that. So, when it comes to trust is much worse here. Do you have ideas how to start building trust? Because that's obviously the first step.
So should we introduce Meiron? He started this whole thing. This is Meiron Rappoport.
He's the helper of the movement.
Yeah. He started this with Oni and Mashiv.
Good morning, and sorry I was in another meeting. I think trust is of course the most difficult to imagine. When the model is fine, but when you look at the trust today, how can you reach such a level of trust that will allow such an idea to be implemented? This is really the main obstacle. Of course, for this, trust takes time. But this is not maybe a good answer, but it takes time. But I think if we look even inside Israel today, sovereign Israel, is practically a binational state. It's not a club that way, but with a state with more than 20% of our minority, is practically a binational state. In France, you have, nobody knows exactly, but 9%, 8% Muslim, and they say, okay, France now becomes a multicultural state. Israel, 21% Arabs, and 18% I think Muslim and 3% Christian. I don't think divided numbers. So this is already existent. And inside Israel, the Palestinian minority inside Israel, which is very large, more than 1.5 million people, there's no real balance between Jews and Arabs inside Israel. Okay, there are tensions, there are political tensions, there are social tensions, there are a lot of laws.
So you're saying we can discriminate?
Yes, and it works to a certain extent, not to a perfect extent. It works to the sense, maybe it's a little bit demagogic example, but if you're a Jew and you go to a hospital here in Jerusalem, and the chances that you will be operated by an Arab doctor is 20%, 25%, If you are operating in the north, in Galilee, it may be 30%. So, and a Jew does not even think about it. He goes, okay, somebody opens his chest and fixes out, and no problem. So I think trust can be created, and the reason, I think, there are many reasons, it's not one reason, but I think one of the reasons it works is that Palestinian, Israeli Palestinian, and Israeli Jews have can vote and be elected, have a right to vote and a right to be elected. They're at least theoretically equal before the law. They can vote, apply to the court. So I say equality. Equality is the main thing that creates first trust and then security. More than army.
So we're taking the present situation inside Israel and kind of expanding it to the whole world. Yes.
Yeah, just
yes,
one
please.
second. Because what you're saying.
do not expand the sovereignty of Israel.
Yeah, just expand it.
Yeah.
No. That's not exactly what we're doing.
Because we are talking about national rights also. Independent.
Yeah, but the point is equality before the law and citizenship is extended.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's
Okay.
No, okay, good.
Yes, please.
How do you all foresee implementation of this plan? Do you have political allies? I mean, I know you don't, in either the Israeli Knesset or the Palestinian Authority. That's at the end of the day, the decision makers.
Is the movement.
Who make the plan, or do you call for a referendum, or what's kind of the method you think such a deal would be implemented? And also, what would be the view on the Golan Heights? Golan Heights.
Well, Golan Heights is actually Syrian. This is a Syrian issue, not part of either, Palestine or Israel. That remains between Syria and
So that's done.
yeah.
It's not done, but it's nowadays.
But you don't see it as a part of, so the
This
border
is something that we as Palestinians cannot talk and resolve.
But it's very relevant for Israel.
An Israeli issue that is been ongoing with Syria. I'm sure, within the peace environment, things will always work. Because the bigger problem is the Palestinian-Israeli, sort of conflict. The Golan Heights was occupied in 1967 as a result of, sort of Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Anyway, it's a byproduct. So we can't solve the byproduct before we actually resolve the product itself. And this is what I'm thinking about, this particular issue. Okay. So we keep that out.
So what about the
About the movement? About the movement, for some facts. But when we started to develop the idea, the vision, and the plans almost 5 years ago, during the Ramadan on the summer, almost 5 years ago. We searched after Palestinian partners, brave, independent partners, and we found them. Both of the groups were connected originally to thinkings of the one-state solution, but
Both the Palestinian group and the Israeli group.
yeah, separately, and we found each other that we came to this kind of two-state, one homeland. And after 1.5 years of sitting and dealing about the ideas and about the main issues, we were in a place that we should deal with our strategic plans. If we are going from upstairs to talk with.
Top down or
Yeah, and we had some meetings with Israeli politicians. Our intuitions, like Yael said, were that some of the reasons that also agreement we can see what happened with it was that it was based upon negotiations and not about deep agreements and deep places that we agree with each other, that we deal and agree, and it wasn't connected to the field of both nations, both people, and we decided to be developed like a grassroots movement. We had until now more than 400 public meetings, local conferences. So
building up on the grassroots.
the main reaction was, and I was participating in not all of them. Meiron participated in almost all of them, but you could see, you could hear some of the questions that we heard today also, but you could see I saw the light of hope in the eyes of Israelis and Palestinians. We are talking, you can double these 400 in some thousands in each. We are talking about many thousands of people from Palestinians and Israelis that heard and had the opportunity to see that there is a potential, there is a partner after almost 15 years that, if you remember, that Ehud Barak came back from the Camp David summit and told everyone that there is no Palestinian partner, and most of Israelis accepted it like it is a physical axiom that we should accept. And from the other side, we also know that most of the Palestinians feel that there is no Israeli partner for the other side. So we know in our movement.
Meetings in the Palestinian.
Also in the territories, also in settlements, and all over Israel, with Israeli Palestinian Israelis and with all kinds of Israelis. We have in our movement some sectors that didn't take part in the peace procedure at all, like the Mizrahi Jews, like the ultra-Orthodox Jews that were out of the game, totally out of the game, and they are part of our movement.
First question, do you have an actual plan of how you're going to promote this?
Well, I mean, in terms of numbers, I think that from what we can say, like there's a solid 2,500 people that are activists within the movement of different degrees, which is a lot. I mean,
2,500.
2,500. So like,
25.
yeah. So I mean, for Israel, it's a lot. I don't know if you know how this works. Activism in Israel, you have 40 people, and it's already something.
And on the
And on the Palestinian side, between
On the
400 to
Palestinian-
500, I think.
Yeah,
is
well,
the
on the
difference.
Palestinian side, the sentiment that we need to measure, because we did a conference and the whole world was full with 120 people attending. But I can tell you this, and these are facts, that the only question that is raised within Palestine now, would the Israelis accept this? Sounds too good to be true. The Israelis will not accept it. These are the questions we get back. And the second is, would this, because the Palestinian on the official side, and I know quite a number of them, are thinking, we have been recognized by so many states in the world. Would this actually detour the world from what have been recognized so far and achieved? We don't want to actually propose something and start working from point zero. This is the concern and anxiety. But they're saying this is a wonderful thing. So as a solution to this, within the Palestinian society, we're saying we're building on what has already been there, because we still have the two states, and then working extra by demolishing walls, creating equality and everything.
I think that they met with Mashiv Haruach and the people from the movement, and the response, as much as I understand, that I didn't meet personally, but was Abu Mazen said, let the Israelis off. Meaning, okay, it's fine by me, but I cannot endorse something that still is not an official proposal. by Israel, by Israeli officials. So I can understand this response, but this is the main atmosphere of the debate.
Our strategy is becoming the third option from two states, one state. Will be the third option that will be common in any place, in any house, in any community, all over Israel, Palestine, and internationally, that they will talk about this new option, and after it will become the third option, it's gradually it will become mainly maybe, and we now see by new surveys that are coming in Israel and in Palestine, that they start talking about the confederation model, and our president Rovi Rivlin is talking about it, and you can start.
No, Rivlin is
hearing.
talking about one state.
No, but he became from federation, and he.
It's a confederation model.
In confederation, you thought about maybe offering it also to Jordan?
We don't.
To Jordan.
Well, Jordan would automatically be part of this eventually, but we cannot be now talking about Jordan or the Jordanians. But if you remember, 80%, yeah, just if you can, 80% of the Jordanian people are Palestinians.
Yeah.
So
No, this is why I'm mentioning George.
I understand because I have to run pretty soon. First of all, I've just come from giving a paper at Harvard on the same subject, and there are quite a number of organizations, Israeli, non-Israeli, Palestinians, and others, all working with the intention to try to resolve this conflict. I come back to what I said before. If we don't cooperate, if you don't try to not to maximize what your ideas are, but look for the solutions, we're not going to make any progress. So please can keep that in mind. I think that the reference to the fact that the Torah dictates certain behavior is a very important message to try to prepare, I think, a very large chunk of Israeli society to become sympathetic to the Palestinians, because for the most time until now, people don't think that Palestinians exist. I spoke with a rabbi at Kiryat Arba, and he told me, are there really any Palestinians?
Yeah.
So I think it is very important that the Jewish community play a very active role, particularly youth
George,
leadership.
leave your card here, or
Please give him my card because I don't have any cards.
But make sure you are connected.
I have for quite a long time, now for 10 years, quietly and behind the scenes worked on the idea of two states, and Meiron knows about it. He met me first in London and explained to him that a lot of it has to be done quietly and with a lot of thought. I think the Palestinians are ready to accept a decent solution on a minimalist line. 22% is very little for the Palestinians to have. They're ready to welcome a Jewish presence, and I think it's very important that we encourage these very simple ideas, that the Palestinians are ready for accepting the Jewish community to remain in any way as long as they will be contributing to the future of a democratic Palestinian state.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Can I ask you for your name?
Yeah, I'll give you all the details. Because he has to run.
Okay.
He is punctual. He keeps his.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please, and we'll wrap up.
Okay. As a French citizen, thank you very much for the comparison with the French-German reconciliation. I think it's interesting. I would like to know a bit more about the political system you would like to implement. Which fields would be taken in charge by the Confederation? Which fields would be taken in charge by the two states? And do you have any idea how you could develop some confederal symbols, flags? I don't know if you thought about it.
There's always, we are always in a certain kind of tension with our movement. On the one hand, promoting the idea of sharing instead of separating, and that this land is shared and that there's a place for all, and giving an idea and hope in times of lost despair. And on the other hand, giving enough details for people so that this idea will be tangible. And it's a tension, because if you go into details, then people will have to, yes, but the men of Ra will pay taxes, and we don't have all the answers. We have ideas, but we don't have all the answers. I think what's nice about the confederation idea is that it is flexible. The main idea is clear to us. There will be two independent states, sovereign state, with a flag, with a parliament, with representation in the UN. This is clear. And that these two states will be part of a joint confederation, union, whatever. This is clear. Exactly what will be the powers of these confederal bodies is something to be decided by both states once they will be independent, the two peoples will feel free, Palestinians will feel free, Israelis will feel free of threat, of terror, and once the two people will be free, I think then they could discuss the details of how deep this confederation will be. It is sure will take care of security, it will sure take care of human rights on both sides, it will surely deals with environment, and these are evident, and it will sure deals with economy and social justice, social rights, but exactly how powerful this confederation will be, it took, for Europe, it's also an ongoing process, It went upwards, now maybe it goes a little bit downwards, it's an ongoing process, it's not something that can be decided from the start.
Okay,
This way.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say one thing about the details. So it's true that it can get you distracted, but there's also one thing about the details that I found interesting. I was very interested in the part about citizenship and residency and kind of figuring how that worked. And one of the things I realized is how important the local communities were going to be. So local identity and local services, so education and health and opportunities are going to be very, very critical on the local level, because that's where people will actually, live their life. And this is kind of a new way of thinking for people whose life is very local, both Israelis and Palestinian settlers for sure. For Palestinians, there's no question about that. But this national level is kind of going to be an intermediary. There's going to be three levels. You're going to have the confederation, you're going to have the national and the local, and then the decision will be who needs what at that time. And we know that certain infrastructures are going to need a lot more, and certain places are going to just need the doors to be open. So that takes, it's a different kind of way of thinking about how you do this redistribution, which is, there's no question that that's maybe our biggest obstacle.
I think, just one example. I think I subscribe to Jerusalem Post, and of course I read it. I get quite a lot of issue. I've written, sometimes a few things in the past, and then all of a sudden I started receiving advertising for apartment to buy in Netanya. So I received the first one, I ignored it, the second, the third. So I wanted to put an end to this. So I filled in the application. They've actually stopped writing to me from that. This is really the time where we want to be. That's where we want to move on. Why can't I buy an apartment in Netanya if I'm using my own money? I'm not actually encroaching on anybody. And it is just a civil right for me to have this now, and mind you, I'm talking here as a British citizen, because they were writing to me in the United Kingdom as a British citizen.
The principle is that we know is that Nasri will be able to buy an apartment in Netanya, but I will be able to buy an apartment in Nablus. How exactly will it work? This also for the governments and the leaderships of the two peoples, once this solution will be really on the table of the negotiation to decide.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing a ray of hope here.
Thank you.
Before we say goodbye, I'd like to give you our something we do, a gesture to our speakers, our associate members, Dr. Yael.
Thank you.
Eliaz.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please, and Meiron, you earned it big time. Thank you very much, and Nasri.